I grew up at Westminster Presbyterian Church in Springfield, Missouri. And at Westminster Presbyterian Church in Springfield, Missouri, every week, all year long, throughout my childhood, we would recite the Apostles' Creed. I learned it by rote. I was fairly young when I could say it, even if I messed up some of the phrases, some of the words, like the way I heard them was not quite the way they were spelled. You know some of those, yeah, you were that kid. Yeah, so I had it memorized and I could recite it like a good Presbyterian child would in between reading books that I got from the church library where my dad took me before services, and whatever it was I might draw on the bulletin. And in the Apostles' Creed, there's this line about believing in the communion of the saints. But truth be told, I didn't know what that meant. Now, blessings on the Reverend John Fortner or Jim Fortner for having to be, John is his son, for having to be my pastor through confirmation. Because I had a zillion questions, some things don't change, and he was the one who got put on the spot with me trying to figure things out. And that was when Star Wars was out, so I had lots of questions about the Force. Jim Fortner has gone on to his reward, and so blessings on his soul for having me in a confirmation class. But honestly, it wasn't until I was in seminary that I realized that I didn't know what the communion of saints meant. Like, what does that refer to? Who are the saints? I mean, we aren't Catholic, we know that. We don't have those saints. They get a whole bunch of saints. We don't have any like that. It's part of what we gave up in the Reformation. If you were here last week, you got some of that history. We lost a lot in the Reformation. We gained a lot, trade-offs. Communion of the saints. I know communion, that part I learned. Communion in my home church was little bitty bits of bread, not like this, little squares, little cubes of bread, usually with the crust cut off. I haven't found anything in Scripture that says you need to cut the crusts off the communion bread. But apparently it's a tradition in a lot of Presbyterian churches. The only time I recommend that is if someone shows up at church with garlic bread. That's a little tough first thing in the morning. But communion of the saints. It wasn't until I was in seminary that I started to learn about this. And one thing I learned is that we are part of a tradition that follows Paul when we talk about saints. That when Paul wrote about saints, he meant all y'all. Okay? This is where Southern vernacular is helpful to us. All y'all are the saints. Now let's be clear, all y'all are also sinners and saints. That we are all of those things all at the same time. And the communion of the saints is all of us. But it's not just us, not just those of us in the room. It's also everyone who's gone before us. And it's also everyone who comes after us. And I had a classmate who drew a picture of this that was the thing that knocked me back and made me realize that I hadn't understood what this very common theological concept in our churches meant. They drew a picture of the communion table. And around the table gathered saints. And above the table gathered saints. And that when we gather around this table, either stepping up here or receiving the gifts as they come to you, we are gathering with all our spiritual ancestors and also the generations that come after us. And this table is not our table, this table is a global table. So this table reaches across the world, and we gather with saints from every country and culture, every language group, every child of God. We gather in this moment. On All Saints, we pay particular attention to those who have gone before. We follow in their footsteps. We consider again how it is we are called to be faithful. How it is we are to hear a psalm like this that says, those who are not good stewards, those who are not faithful, reap what they sow. If you don't take care of the space around you, it becomes a wasteland. But in God's world, in God's dream, all those who hunger and thirst in any way will be fed and will draw from springs of water. Jesus preaches this sermon and offers these blessings. And I don't know if you noticed, but those who receive blessings in Jesus' sermon are not the ones who are most popular or most powerful in our own culture. Did you notice that? In our country, we celebrate celebrity and strength and wealth, beauty, conquest. We rarely celebrate peacemakers and the merciful and those who are meek. But we gather with the saints around this table, and we remember those we've loved, who have gone on, who we believe are present with us in this moment. And we share their light. We reflect the light of God in the world because, especially on a cloudy day, we remember the world needs more light, more mercy, more meekness, more peacemakers, more springs of water, more food for the hungry, more just for those who suffer from oppression, more love. I don't know if you've had the opportunity to celebrate this holy day in the church year in this way. But I have several dozen candles up here. And if there's someone that you are remembering this morning, if there's someone that you would like to give thanks for their light, I invite you to come forward and carefully light a candle and share their light, share the light of the saints with those who need it. May God's light bless you this day and always as members of the communion of saints. Amen. Amen. This day, in particular, we remember those amongst our congregation who have walked on. John Akers Jr., Karen Atkinson, Mike Bamman, Estella Booth, Jerry Graff, Michael Keller, Emily Cooner, Norma Najim, and Marjorie Sebring, and all those that you love, and all those you remember. I invite you to come.